Hello and welcome to Tools of a Civil War Soldier. My name is John Miller. I'm the Executive Director here at the Shippensburg Historical Society. And today, as you probably guessed, we're going to talk a little bit about the equipment as well as the uniform of a Civil War soldier who served with the Union Army. Shippensburg, being a small town, had men fight from 1861 all the way to the close of the war in 1865. In August of 1862, Company D of what would become the 130th Pennsylvania was raised right here in Shippensburg. They marched to Harrisburg, where they were officially mustered into military service, and from there they transferred to Washington, D.C., where they would begin receiving training as far as School of the Soldier. School of the Soldier is where you basically learn how to stand as a soldier, as well as how to fire a musket and how to maneuver within the ranks. Many of these men from Shippensburg, their average age would have been anywhere from 16 to 25 years of age, weighing about approximately 140 to 145 pounds, and they may have stood anywhere from 5 foot tall 5 inches to 5 foot tall 8 inches. That pretty much made up the average Civil War soldier. When these men went into training, it's not like basic training today where you take weeks or even months. These guys literally received training in a very little amount of time. So for the 130th Pennsylvania, newly mustered into the Union Army, when the threat of the Maryland campaign, when the Confederate Army decided to invade Maryland, resulting in the Battle of Antietam, without even a month experience under their belts, they received their baptism of fire on September 17th, 1862, at a place called Bloody Lane along the banks of the Antietam Creek. From there, they would fight at Fredericksburg before being mustered out of service and returning home. Other Shippensburg men fought on the fields of Gettysburg in 1863, as well as in the Wilderness and Spotsylvania campaigns in 1864. From there, a lot of those men served in the infantry, perhaps the artillery, as well as the cavalry. Now, I am dressed as your average Union infantry man. I have my uniform, my blanket roll, which is pretty much has some personal items in it, as well as a ground cloth inside of it. I have my cap pouch, cartridge box, bayonet, and bayonet scabbard. I have my canteen and my haversack, and my haversack is where food would be placed at, approximately 3 days of what they would call rations. A lot of this terminology we're going to break down further as this video goes. But real quickly, I just wanted to go through the motions without firing a musket inside my building, of course, but just to show you how this operated and how it was loaded. And they did that through a series of moves called load in 9 times. So it took 9 times, or basically 9 steps in order to load this, and then there were 3 additional steps on top of that in order to fire it. So the first command would be to load. And what the soldier does is he takes the rifle, brings it to the front of his body. His right hand, he will quickly grasp to his cartridge box. From there, the second command, take cartridge, is given. He will reach inside his cartridge box and he will pull out a cartridge. From there, the third command, tear cartridge. Fourth command, charge cartridge. And that's where he's taking the black powder first, followed by the projectile, and putting it into the barrel. From there, draw rammer, 2 moves. Ram cartridge. What he is doing is he's taking the black powder as well as the projectile, or in this case the bullet, and he is compressing it as tight as he can to the breech of the weapon. Return rammer. Prime. He'll reach into his cap pouch, pull out a small percussion cap where he'll place it on the cone of the rifle. From there, shoulder arms. Shoulder arms lets the company officers know who in the ranks are ready for the next 3 commands, which in this case would be ready, aim, and then fire. Out on the battlefield, a good soldier should be able to fire this rifle musket 3 times per minute although a lot of times battlefield conditions would not allow for that. So let's go ahead and break down the tools and the equipment of what it is that I'm wearing. And at the end of the presentation, if you're interested, I can send you a worksheet for your students or your youth group to work on. So this is a forage cap. This is a type of headgear that was issued out to Civil War soldiers when they joined into the Army. It's more along the lines for fatigue duty. However, if you were doing dress parades, they would require you or issue you a more stylish hat known as a hardy hat. And unfortunately, I don't have an example of a hardy hat with me. But the forage cap or a personal slouch hat were very popular types of headgear worn among Union soldiers. Moving over, we have the dress frock or a frock coat. This would be issued out as part of your dress uniform itself. As being infantry, as you can see, we have the piping on the cuff here. It's in blue, as well as up here on the collar. The cavalry and artillery, or anybody who was in mounted services, so to speak, did not receive frock coats. Instead, they received what was known as a mounted services jacket, which was cut down much shorter than what a frock coat is. The frock coat that you see here is partially lined. There's no lining in the back, but you do have a lining here with cotton batting on the inside, and that quilting gives the wearer a little more comfort when he is wearing a knapsack or some of his heavy gear. And that's because the average Civil War soldier on full campaign orders would be carrying anywhere between 35 to 45 pounds worth of equipment. Over here we have the fatigue jacket. So this would be for special work details where you're going to get dirty, or if you're going to be performing hard labor. But as the Civil War progressed, more and more Union soldiers took favor to the fatigue jacket here because of the fact that it was durable, it was comfortable, it was a lot lighter to wear than the frock coat. Not to mention, it did resemble the pattern of a regular man's sack coat that he would have worn for every day-to-day business. This material here is made from wool flannel, and as you can see, it is lined. Moving over here, we have the trousers, sky blue kersey. And trousers are very simple. I mean, really the pattern of the trousers haven't changed much, with the exception back then they had buttons to button up the fly. But other than that, you still have pockets. Here's a pocket for a watch right here. And then instead of wearing a belt, here we have what's called braces. And braces are the name for like modern day suspenders. And then moving up to the shoes, we have what's called brogans. And brogans are basically, they're a leather shoe. Very popular to wear as far as issuances from the quartermaster in both the Union and Confederate armies. So when you're looking at shoes, this here is pretty much the standard wear for a Civil War soldier. So here's an example of several tools that would have been used by a Civil War soldier in the field. And we're going to start with the accoutrements first and make our way up to the rifle. So here we have a cartridge box. And inside the cartridge box is where 40 rounds of ammunition would be held for the soldier. And here's the types of ammunition we're talking about. So here's a pre-rolled cartridge. And what it is that you have a projectile, which in this case would be a mini ball. And then back here, you would have your gunpowder, or black powder in this case. Now, there were 4 types of ammunition that were issued out. However, we're just going to deal with only 2. So this one here is a round ball. And then here you have a new technology known as the mini ball. The mini ball was meant to be more accurate, and for a fact, it was. During the American Revolution, with smoothbore weapons and this type of ammunition here, the gun was accurate up to maybe 75 to 100 yards. But now with rifling introduced into the barrels of the guns and this particular type of projectile, these weapons are now accurate up to about 400 to 500 yards. And the reason being is because when these left the gun, they spiraled, or they held up against the grooves of the rifling, which causes the projectile to spiral. So think of a quarterback in the National Football League. When he throws a Hail Mary to his receiver, the ball has a twist to it. And that allows him to be more accurate at longer distances. But could you imagine if the quarterback took a soccer ball in a shape like this and tried to throw it down the field to his receiver? He wouldn't be able to get the accuracy on it as he wanted because it doesn't have that twist. So that's kind of rifling in its sense. It's more accurate, and because of that, the ammunition would become more accurate as well. So the cartridge box, now let's move over to the soldier's belt. So we have just a standard belt made out of leather. Here we have a cap pouch, which holds percussion caps. And then over here we have a scabbard, which holds a bayonet. And of course this goes around the soldier's waist. And last but not least, that would have been issued out by the Ordnance Department, is the actual rifle itself. And this is known as a muzzleloader, or in this case, a rifled musket, because of the rifling that's inside the barrel. So the ammunition, starting with gunpowder, followed by the projectile, will go in here first. You would take this tool here and ram everything home to compress it up here. Then you take a percussion cap, put right here on the cone, and at the full cock, when you squeeze the trigger, this hammer falls on the percussion cap, which creates a spark, which ultimately sets off the gun charge and fires the weapon. Moving over to other items that a Civil War soldier would have carried. Definitely would have carried a canteen. You hold about 2 quarts of water into it. This cloth here is not meant to be an insulator of any sort. It's just to make the canteen look more uniformed with the uniformed soldier. Now, you can go a couple days without food, but the canteen, you could not go several days without clean water. This bag here, this is known as a haversack, and inside the haversack you would carry 3 days rations. Rations could be coffee beans, could be hardtack, salted pork, sugar, molasses, basically whatever the commissary is going to give you. And a lot of times the food would be kept in sacks or in paper. That way you didn't get the inside of this too greasy. And you've got to remember, the haversack here with the rations in it, think of a lunch bag or a lunch box that you would take to school. Here we have a tin plate, and as you can see, very thin. Here we have a can that has been recycled into a boiler. So instead of carrying maybe a pot, a bowl, and a cup, I can go ahead and recycle a peach can in this case, put a wire basket on the top for a holder, and now I can boil, I can drink, I can even cook. So this one tool here basically took the place of a tin cup, perhaps maybe a small bowl, as well as my plate. Again, tin cup. If you were lucky enough to be able to grab a hold of one of these or have it sent from home, here is a small coffee maker or coffee pot. Here we have a canteen half with utensils, eating utensils. And what some soldiers would do is take a canteen, split it in half, and now you have a frying pan as well as a bowl, and you can lift it up by doing that with a utensil. And instead of carrying utensils like these, they had utensils that pretty much looked like a Swiss Army knife. So you would put these together, and then after that you would go ahead and put 1, 2, and then 3. Makes it compact. You can stick it in your pocket, in your knapsack or haversack. And as you can tell, it is very compact compared to carrying things like that. Moving over, we have the knapsack here. And think of a backpack. That's exactly what a knapsack is, but only this knapsack carries the soldier's personal equipment. So we have the sack portion here, and inside the sack portion, we have clothing such as clean socks, underdrawers, as well as my issued out Dalmat flannel shirt. Here I have a gum blanket, and this would be used to keep me dry, especially in the rain. If you ever heard of Goodyear, well, Charles Goodyear is the guy who really helped define and produce gum-made materials such as this blanket. And then in here we have my shelter half, in which 2 shelter halves make up a small tent, as well as my blanket. And they are kept safely stored here in an area called the trunk. And then over here we have toothbrush as well as tooth powder. I have a washcloth, a mirror, a straight razor to shave with. So this was pretty much a part of my hygiene kit. We have matches to start our campfires with. This is called a housewife, and as you can see, I have needles, pins, and more pins, scissors, thread, as well as extra needles here. And basically a housewife was where a soldier would make amends to his uniform. So if he got a hole in it, he would have maybe pieces of fabric down here to where he could go ahead, mend his uniform back up to standards. Remember, a Civil War soldier was only issued so many parcels of clothing per year. After that, it was up to you to pay for it. So you definitely wanted to take good care of your kits. And then we have a scarf that would have been sent from home, especially with the colder months approaching. And then here we have my wallet, and inside I got letters as well as money. And then soldiers loved to not only write letters home during downtime, but they also loved to play card games or even games of chance using dice. So to fight boredom in camp, this was a very powerful weapon to do so. And there were all kinds of card games that the soldiers would play.